Yes, okay, we are now live. Hello, John, and all our viewers. Thanks for joining this live stream, which we haven't really done before, so apologies in advance for the inevitable technical issues, but hopefully we will get through it. Obviously, there's lots happening every day, so we don't really have time at the moment to pre-record the interviews about the articles that we're writing. So we thought we should just go live and talk about the story that's just come out on the Declassified UK website, which you've written, John, about this development. I think it was last night that it was announced that Luke Akehurst, one of the most infamous pro-Israel lobbyists in the Labour Party, has been given a safe seat in North Durham. Did you see this one coming, John?
Yeah, no, to be honest. Even as the rumours were circulating earlier this week, I saw a lot of different people, even Michael Crick, who often knows in advance who's going to be selected as the next MPs. But I still didn't think that the Labour Party was going to do it, to be honest, for similar reasons that they didn't decide to select Paul Mason to run against Jeremy Corbyn in Islington North. And the reason they didn't do that, supposedly, it was because they didn't want to turn that local campaign into a circus. And so I thought, for the same reasons that Starmer and the NEC, of which Luke Akehurst is actually a member of, wouldn't in fact, impose Luke Akehurst on some constituency that's never actually voted for him. Yeah, of course, lo and behold, last night it was announced that he has been selected, without any voting process by the local members of the CLP, to run in Durham North, which is a relatively safe Labour seat, and they've held on to that seat since 1983, or at least since the constituency was created in 1983. And I think in 2019 it was Kevin Jones who won that election by about 5,000 votes. So the Labour Party are holding on to a fairly strong majority there. So he's been parachuted in by the Central Labour Party, who must be quite confident that he's going to win, Phil.
Yeah, and that majority they got in 2019 would have been bigger if it hadn't been for the kind of the Brexit phenomenon that made some Labour MPs in the North, quite a few in fact, lose their seats. But the guy who held it before him, he was on the Intelligence Committee. He was always asking questions about arms expenditure in the military. So he was quite a hawkish guy. So when I saw him stand down, I thought, okay, that's interesting. But they found someone even more hawkish and pro-Trident and pro-Israel in particular to replace him. Can you tell us a bit more? He's been around for years and years, Luke Akehurst, lobbying for Israel. But can you kind of talk us through some of the key points in your article about his activity?
Yeah, sure, Phil. I wanted to just jump back to what you said about him being pro-military and pro-Trident first. There's a lot of tweets that have been circulating that I think he's been deleting some of them en masse. But some of the things he said about Trident, there was a tweet where he said, I'd use it on 5 major cities and maybe test it first, just as a warning shot. I think he created a quiz for certain activists, and basically you got more points if you supported the Americans in the war in Vietnam. I think he was a staunch supporter of the war in Iraq in 2003. So, as you mentioned, it would be difficult to find someone more pro-military than Luke Akehurst. But jumping back to the Israel lobby point, in 2011, he was appointed as the director of an organisation called We Believe in Israel. In fact, it wasn't even an organisation at the time. It was a major conference attended by around 1,500 people, organised by BICOM. BICOM at the time, and less so now, but particularly in the late 2000s, early 2010s, was definitely the most influential pro-Israel lobby organisation in Britain. And at this We Believe in Israel conference, you had a number of Israeli diplomats. You had the Israeli ambassador in London. You had the Minister for Education, who recently, in fact, in 2020, basically said that Israel should just hold on to all of the illegal settlements in the West Bank. There was also interesting media figures such as Jonathan Friedland, who's a Guardian columnist. He kind of occupies the kind of pro-Zionist wing of reporting on Israel at the Guardian. There was also Wes Streeting was an interesting name that came up. Who's, I'm not sure if he was an MP at the time. He was the former head of the National Union of Students. Now, obviously, he's the Shadow Health Secretary. So at this conference, the idea was basically to start building not only kind of top-down support for Israel in Britain, but also grassroots support for Israel. So We Believe in Israel kind of grew out of this initial conference, and it's been working very hard to support Israel ever since. I wanted to add that something that I found on something called the Web Archive, where you can look at websites and you can see what they were posting 10 years ago, 15 years ago. They no longer exist. And so I found this toolkit that We Believe in Israel had been promoting alongside the 2011 conference. And it's quite interesting, particularly for those who still laughably claim that pro-Israel lobbying doesn't exist in the UK, or it's an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, and so on and so forth. This is a 75-page document which lays out in a very descriptive terms precisely how pro-Israel lobbyists should operate in Britain, what are the most effective ways. It even cites psychologists. It talks about we should learn from the likes of Stephen Fry to understand how we can talk to people about Israel. And two of the main things that it suggested that the attendees did was invite your MPs over for dinner. People appreciate the warmth of the gesture of inviting people around for dinner. And then you can basically try and, earn personal ties with politicians, so that then they can be, relied upon to support Israel in Parliament. So it's basically 75 pages of all of these different methods that activists for Israel in Britain can support, can earn support for Israel.
Yeah, and then from that humble beginning in 2011 with We Believe in Israel, he certainly became one of the most influential lobbyists. And Al Jazeera did that undercover investigation called The Lobby, where an Israeli embassy staffer was secretly filmed discussing Luke Akehurst and their involvement with him. Let me just try and play some of that clip now.
So Luke Akehurst is the director of We Believe in Israel. He's a great guy.
So you know him?
Of course. So Luke is a great guy. Of course, I know. He's a great friend. We Believe in Israel is sitting together in the offices of rightward, but it's not the same organization. He's a great campaigner. He's one of the best in the inside, in all the parties. There's not a lot of people like him. And Luke asked him if he's keen to.
Can I mention your name towards Luke?
Yeah.
So that was Shai Massot, who was then kicked out of the UK because of his efforts to take down a British government foreign minister, Alan Duncan. But the work that he was doing in the Labour Party with Luke Akehurst in some capacity has never really faced any proper scrutiny. And we saw last night another Labour candidate, Faiza Shaheen, was actually she's been campaigning for years and years in Chingford, which is in Duncan Smith's seat. At the last minute, she was suddenly kicked off the candidate list, and they say it's because of some tweets that she liked years and years ago. And one of them refers to basically someone just describing how the Israel lobby works, and that there are, she said, professional, or she liked a tweet that said there are professional organizations which, if you criticize Israel, how encounter lots and lots of people criticizing you, because these professional organizations are able to mobilize supporters in that way. And obviously one of these professional organizations would be Luke Akehurst's We Believe in Israel, and in a kind of spooky parallel, he is at the same time given this safe seat. But do you think this might actually force people to acknowledge the role the Israel lobby in British politics now. You know, if he does win this seat, he's going to have to declare in his register of interests where his funding's coming from and all the activities that he is earning income from. Do you think this might actually, in a way, I mean, it might be a chance to kind of shine another light on him and the wider activities he's involved in? Yeah,
I think to a degree, yes, but to a greater degree, it's already happening, Phil. So there's been various different media publications. Like recently, Alan Rusbridger wrote an article in Prospect magazine, basically talking about, you know, who has bought the Jewish Chronicle, where, you know, the Jewish Chronicle has become one of the most vociferous defenders of Israel, particularly over the last 5 or 6 years after it was bought by a shadowy consortium. So people are starting to ask questions that should have been asked, you know, a very long time ago, but this is obviously within the context of Israel's brutal war on Gaza. You also saw on LBC recently, it was the news agents, Lord Wolney, aka John Woodcock, who is the former chair of Labour Friends of Israel, who's now preparing this major report for the government as the supposed independent advisor on political violence, which basically calls on the government to prescribe groups like Palestine Action. And so the news agent said, you know, can't you see a conflict of interest here? You know, people are going to be raising the issue that you're a former chair of Labour Friends of Israel. He's also accepted funding from the pro-Israel lobby, an organisation called Elnet, in January 2024. So you know, amid the genocide in Gaza. So people are already asking these questions, and that's been, you know, pushed into public consciousness, particularly by events in Gaza. But yes, I mean, Luke Akehurst is probably the most vulgarised incident or episode of Israel lobbyists within, you know, mainstream British politics. I mean, he's been the director for over a decade of an organisation called We Believe in Israel, right? And there's documentary evidence of an actual Israeli embassy official saying, you know, he's a great asset to us. Not word for word, but yeah, paraphrasing this. So yeah, I mean, I think this is going to contribute to a wider public awareness that, you know, there is an Israel lobby in the UK, that it does exert influence over British politics, and it's something that journalists should be really looking into.
Yeah, and when I was editing your article, you actually pointed out that, you know, it's a safe seat, but he may not win. You know, someone could beat him, and I think it's a Labour-Tory kind of battle, really. But we've seen across the UK independent candidates, Workers' Party candidates, Green candidates running on often a pro-Gaza slate. I mean, this has obviously only happened in less than 24 hours, but have you seen any indication of people who might try and stand against him in North Durham?
I haven't seen any evidence yet that someone's going to stand against him on a kind of on a pro-Palestine or an anti-genocide better said ticket. However, it seems clear already that the local Labour Party isn't happy about having this candidate imposed on them. You know, it's clearly an affront to any kind of democratic ideals to simply, you know, take someone who, you know, by all accounts lives in Oxfordshire. Oxfordshire is a good 250 miles from North Durham. It's unclear what relationship Akehurst has with North Durham. It's unclear whether he's ever even been there. So it's simply laughable that, you know, the local population there have to, you know, accept and potentially vote for, well, have to choose whether to vote for someone who seems to have very little to do with their local area. So there is a chance that the local people in North Durham will simply not choose not to vote for him. And at the end of the day, you know, majorities of 5,000 votes have been overcome before. So there is a, you know, decent chance that he might not win there.
Yeah, and I think he was a councillor in London for many years as well prior to this. And like you say, he describes his home CLP, Constituency Labour Party, as being in Oxford. And the NEC, that Labour's National Executive Committee, have got these emergency powers, haven't they? I think their argument would be, well, the election was called it much sooner than people expected, and also a lot of long-time Labour MPs have stood down, I think, quite unexpectedly in some of these cases. So the NEC got these emergency powers to select candidates at accelerated timeframes. And they also, it's the NEC themselves that form a panel, is it, of 3 members, I think, from the NEC to pick these people. And of course, Luke Akehurst is a member of the NEC himself. So see, he has enormous influence in this process in getting himself a seat. I mean, do you think this just shows how much the Labour right now is in control of the party? You know, we've seen some of these other MPs like Diane Abbott, Lloyd Russell-Moyle, who look like they aren't going to be able to stand as Labour candidates.
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing at the moment is a fast-paced call of the Labour left, but we've been seeing this happen in slow motion ever since Keir Starmer was elected as leader of the Labour Party. Obviously, Jeremy Corbyn's deselection or losing the whip was the most clear case of that. But we've seen the Labour left pushed out over the past 4 years, four and a half or so years now. And you've got the same situation with the unions. I mean, the unions are supposed to have some kind of power over the Labour Party, because obviously the Labour Party gets a lot of its funding from the main unions in Britain. But what Starmer's done over the past few years, but particularly over the past few weeks, is soften all of the Labour legislation that he'd promised. Also, top rate tax of on the top 5%. He's watering down everything that the unions basically gave him their backing to do. So what we're seeing is, Starmer's authoritarian streak, and that he's actually quite right wing, which many on the left have known for quite a long time. But I think some left wing MPs just thought if they stayed in the Labour Party, kept their heads down, they'd get reselected, and then they could continue to try to exercise influence from within. But clearly this option is a total failure. It's appeasement to someone who's not, whose ears aren't open to their influence, to their interests. And they're going to keep pushing further to the right, I think, once they're in power. I mean, once they're in power, what's to stop them?
Yeah, I'm just looking in the comments, so I'm not very good at multitasking, but Scott M has pointed out that reform could even be a challenge. So from the right to Labour in the northeast in Durham. But yeah, whether the reform candidate will be more right wing than Luke Akehurst or not, it will be a tough battle. The other thing I wanted to mention is you spoke about John Woodcock, whose role as an Israel lobbyist is finally coming under a bit of scrutiny. I should point out you were one of the first journalists really writing about that many months ago, his conflict of interest, and that he is the government's supposedly independent advisor on political extremism, and he's advocating for groups like Palestine Action to be banned. And yet at the same time, he has these long-standing ties to Israel lobby groups and arms firms. So yeah, congratulations again on that trailblazing work. We've had quite a busy week at Declassified. We published an exclusive on Tuesday, I think it was now, about King Charles accepting an award from a Nazi veteran, which if you haven't checked that out, that's up on our website, with a photo from that award ceremony. And also today we published a story about this revolt inside the Foreign Office, where up to 300 civil servants have formally written to ministers protesting about UK policy on Gaza or expressing concerns. And some Foreign Office staff have even refused to work on Gaza because of concerns that the UK is complicit in war crimes and breaches of international humanitarian law. So that piece is written by a former aid official, someone who worked for DFID, and has spoken to sources in the Foreign Office about this revolt. So I think that's a huge story which hasn't got the attention it deserves yet, but hopefully more people will pick up on that soon. And yeah, John, you're continuing to kind of chronicle the influence of the Israel lobby in British politics as the genocide in Gaza continues.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we've got another piece coming out next week. What I'll try to do with that is basically to log, to do a quantitative analysis of the Israel lobby in British politics, so to look at every single MP that has accepted funding from the Israel lobby, how many trips that they've taken to Israel, so that we've got a broad account really of who's accepted Israel lobby funding amid the general election, so voters can go into the election. With that information, obviously, it's not to say that every MP that has accepted Israel lobby funding is reflexively pro-Israel. Some have been critical, some have not accepted Israel lobby funding for many years. But it's important information to have in the public domain so that people can know whether their local MP has accepted that funding and how they've reacted afterwards.
Yeah, and I won't give away your total findings, but the piece you did last week, which just looked at the Conservatives, you found a third of them in the last Parliament had received funding from the Israel lobby in some capacity, often in these funded trips, hospitality to go and visit Israel on these kind of propaganda tours that they're sent on. So yeah, it's really important to document all of that. And I would encourage people who are watching on YouTube now to also visit our website, declassifieduk.org, to read these articles, and please subscribe to our channel. If you like our work and want to support it financially, if you're in a position to, there's the super thanks button. And also there's a page on our website where you can join Declassified from £3 a month. Thanks for watching. Thanks for writing the article today, John. Speak to you again soon.
Cool. Thanks very much, Phil. Cheers.